Alright, so for those unaware, let's just quickly take a look at the videos that are in this series. Recently I published part 1, which was a primer, just kind of explaining the series and clutch tuning at its high level. This part here, FAQ. We'll get to that very shortly. After this, part 3 is where I break down the different components, the different phases, how about that, of a working clutch. So engagement, and then friction. Actually, you'll see a little bit of disengagement, and then what I like to call seeing is believing. So I will show you everything that I've talked about. Now, if that's not exciting on its own, I will have a bonus video that's interjected focused solely on the Savage X4.6 and which clutch systems it supports. I can tell you now that I've tried a lot of them, more than anybody that I'm aware of. And I'm not bragging or anything like that, but facts are facts. So if I have a lot of experience running different clutches on here, why keep that information to myself? So if you're interested in running, let's say a Tamiya clutch or something, you know, a VP Pro clutch or whatever, on here, I can tell you, or no, once again, I can show you how it performs. Actually, right now I have an M2C Racing clutch on there. Mitch Looper, the owner of M2C Racing, great guy, by the way. He wasn't even sure when I contacted him a few years ago about it. So, yeah, so there's definite value, and I can tell you now, they work, and they work terrific in the Savage. But yeah, there's value to be had, I hope. And there's a lot of cleanup to do, because as you guys know, look at the title of this video, GirlyPants was wrong. You'll find out in this FAQ why it's called that to begin with. Enjoy the video. And I thought for part 2, the applicable format should be a good old-fashioned frequently asked questions, an FAQ. I'd actually been asked once, you know, how is it that I came up with these questions? Well, I didn't come up with them. You guys did. These were questions that I've seen throughout the years, the most commonly asked questions, and I'll tell you that, unfortunately, I would say probably 95 to 99% of these questions I've seen answered incorrectly at one point or another. And it's mainly on that Nitro RC talk forum or that HPISavage forum. Now, you know, I'm not going to tell you that everything I tell you is correct, but what I will tell you is everything that I explain in this video, I've experienced myself. And I'm happy, as always, to show you the results. Just ask. What's the best clutch? Well, this is probably the most commonly asked question I get, and the answer is it depends. Okay, so what you really want to look for in a clutch is tuning options. In other words, you could take, I'm running a Buku in this right now, and what I could do is I could change tires, change engine, and go to a different, or go to a different place, and the clutch is going to behave differently. Okay, so you have to tune that clutch for its environment and for your engine. And like I said, as we get into the 3 phases, I'll go into more detail about that. But just know there's really not one best clutch, right? That's and you know, that's someone's opinion. But everyone will agree the best clutch is the one that will allow you to change its parameters for its environment. As people become a little bit more educated on clutches, then they might ask, okay, what's the best setup? And the answer is still, you know, it depends, right? So my question back would be, where are you running it? What sort of engine do you have? Because those are really the factors you want to think about. Your available traction and your engine's power. Rules of thumb, the higher bite your surface, like the more grip and traction you can get on your surface, the higher the engagement of the clutch, so that, you know, the thicker the springs, or, you know, however you're tuning it. Now, of course, your engine's power plays a role in that. But then on the opposite side would be the lower in the RPM range you want the clutch to engage if you don't have much traction at all. So as an example, you look at the Savage, and their stock springs are 0.90, which are very, very, it's going to engage at an early RPM, and it comes with a ready-to-run engine. So, at first I was thinking, that doesn't make much sense. Why do they have springs so, at 0.90 that engage early when their engine isn't very strong? You'd like it to engage a little bit higher. But I think because the Savage is meant for off-road, that nasty, most of the real Savage guys, they run their shit like in the mud, right? So I don't know. That's my thinking on it. If I take this car, put it in the mud, I'm springing down. If I take it and run it on the street, I'm springing up. Hopefully that makes sense, guys. So engagement is simply the first phase in the way a clutch works. So it really might help to think of a clutch in three distinct phases, a working clutch. First you have engagement, then friction, and then disengagement. So when you squeeze that throttle, all right, and your vehicle takes off and you let go, those three things happen. If you think about this, all right, it's important to know that a two-stroke engine is going to elicit more power as the RPM rises. So the higher it is in its RPM range, the more power it has available to give. So the idea behind tuning your clutch as far as engagement is concerned is to allow your clutch shoes to make contact or to engage with the clutch bell at the proper RPM level. So once people get their pulse around engagement, the question that they often will ask is, okay, well that's cool, so why don't I just tune the clutch to where it engages at the highest RPM level? If the higher in the RPM range it is, the more power it has available. And I think a lot of bashers tend to struggle with this sometimes because it doesn't really work like that. The intent behind tuning this, right, is not to have the most powerful takeoff. The intent behind tuning your clutch is to have the quickest acceleration. There's a difference, guys, all right? So if your clutch engages at too high of an RPM, outputs too much power to the wheels, you're not going to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible, and that's the whole idea behind this whole vehicle. Your wheels are going to spin, you'll break traction, your front might lift up, etc. All right? So once again, the whole idea is to tune it at the proper RPM level. That's why we have different methods for determining the engagement. This is a question I actually asked at one time because I noticed that kind of the trend was 4-shoe clutches, and I didn't really understand. Okay, well, why not a 5-shoe? Why not a 6-shoe? What's the advantage here? And no one could ever tell me. But then I figured it out, I guess, in that a 4-shoe has more contact with the bell, right? There's more interfacing than a 3-shoe. 3-shoe more so than a 2-shoe. In other words, take a look at this illustration here. What we're really getting into here is the friction side of things, right? So as we noted, a clutch is in an on-off switch, right? So once it engages, it has to move the vehicle. So to put this into context, what most people do in the racing world is they will use a 4-shoe for a heavier vehicle, for like a truggy, okay? Because that's going to reduce the slippage and let it push that vehicle. And they may go with like a 3-shoe and a buggy. Absolutely, shoe weight makes a hell of a difference. Golden rule is the heavier the shoe, the earlier it's going to engage. the lighter the shoe, the later in the RPM range it's going to engage. Might not make a lot of sense until you consider the fact that it's using centrifugal force, right? So in other words, as the flywheel turns, a heavier shoe, it's going to have more inertia, blah, blah, blah. It's going to open up earlier than a lighter shoe. Another little tidbit here is the fact that, let's take a look here. In general, aluminum shoes are lighter than nylon shoes, all right, or plastic shoes. So right here, I'm not sure of the weight. It's upside down, but I promise you, whatever it is, it's lighter, or excuse me, heavier than this right here. All right. In general, these right here weigh about 3 grams. These nylon are going to be about 5 grams. So that's kind of how you want to look at it. All right. So keep that in mind. Consequently, knowing what you know now, look at something like the Savage that come with heavy shoes, thin springs. It's engaging at the earliest possible RPM level that you probably can without, stalling your vehicle. One more thing to consider along those lines is the weight of the flywheel. So this is, you'll see some companies, they might offer, let's say as an example, a steel flywheel as opposed to an aluminum one. Well, they're not doing it, because to make a more durable flywheel, they're actually doing it to make a heavier flywheel. What that does is that essentially delays the spool up. It has the same effect. So like M2C, they have this variable weight flywheel. My God, I can't talk. But you put grub screws in here once again to slow down the spool up. It's the same effect. So if you have like a super fat, super strong engine or something that gets to that proper RPM range really, really quickly, right? And you want to slow it down a little bit, that's how you go about doing it. So some people will, base it on shoes. Some people will base the engagement on springs. Some people will base the engagement on flywheel. Some people, like myself, a little bit of each. Can I mix and match springs? Absolutely you can. So here's the way you want to think about it. When you have different spring tensions, okay, for multi-shoe, 3/4 shoe, you're going to get a little bit more progressive engagement. If you have things set at the same tension, you're going to get a more abrupt engagement. There's no right or wrong. It's just it's what you like, what you prefer. The progressive engagement, if you get that first shoe to hit pretty early, it's kind of like, it feels almost like electric, right? Because it's just, it's instantaneous. All right, this can be a tough question to answer. In my mind, typically what I'll do is I'll focus more on, not so much is the clutch bringing it, but is it doing things it shouldn't do? So I guess manage by exception, right? As we get into the subsequent videos in this series, I will talk more about, what a optimized clutch does and things such as that, and show them to you. For now, I'll just give you some quick examples of some bad things, right? Because I have many more examples of bad clutch setups than I do good ones. In this first one, you can see the clutch, it's obviously slipping. You can hear, okay, and this is the big thing I'll be talking about. It's all about, there's a few visual clues, but it's mostly auditory. You can hear there's too much load on the engine. Its RPM increase, it's not linear like it should be. Now normally at this point I would consider springing up, right? But at the same time, I can also hear that it's engaging at a decent RPM level. So the problem becomes post-engagement, that friction, that second phase. So, if I were to, let's say spring up in this example here, the problem would be that it would then engage at an extremely high RPM level, causing it to snap and then dynamically stumble. The fact that I'm on a high bite surface, I'm getting a lot of traction. That doesn't help. It would be much less pronounced, this example here, if I were on grass or something. Now what had happened here was simply the spring tension, as I noted, was fine, and I had popped a clutch bearing, which threw grease all over the clutch bell, and consequently the shoes were fouled, as you'll see here in a second in this next clip, and the clutch bell was just caked with grease. The shoes were slipping on the grease. Alright, so now let's go to the other end of the spectrum, where the shoes are winning the friction battle this time. And it's the drivetrain that can't keep up. In this example, it was simply due to the surface, to the lack of traction, which was the grass. Things were fine when I was on a surface where I could, get the traction that my spring tension was set for. In other words, I wasn't wasting any power on the street versus on the grass. And then finally here, I was sprung up too much. I didn't have enough traction, and well, this is what happened. Whoa! Alright, so I know that's a lot to digest, and if you get information overload, don't worry about it. Trust me. The only reason that I have any inkling of some aptitude when it comes to clutch tuning is simply because I struggled with it at one point. And the way I approach, pretty much everything is, I don't believe in tiptoeing in the lion's den. I believe you're running there screaming like a maniac and you punch the son of a bitch in the mouth. So this is just kind of how I roll on, going up against things that I struggle with. So it's not rocket science, I promise you. But without a doubt, it's the most misunderstood thing, I think, in the Nitro hobby. What I'm giving here, it would be gold. Like when I was trying to figure all this out, it would have been gold to see some stuff like this. Not because I would have listened to it and just say, oh, okay, and but at least it's another viewpoint. It's something different. It's something to make me think. Because as we all know, there's going to be people out there that are going to be very quick to tell you whatever the hell they want to tell you, whether it's right or wrong. They're going to be adamant about it. I'm not even, in fact, you guys know this, I've prefaced all my videos pretty much by saying, I'm not an expert, take it with a grain of salt, blah, 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 blah. Because my thing is, don't listen to what I say. Just pay attention to what I show you. You could take some nuggets from, this video here, and that's great. But in the end, you're going to put your own stamp on it. So, kind of a long-winded way of saying, don't get discouraged if a lot of this just, went over your head or whatever. Let's do a quick recap. Clutch tuning is dynamic. It's dependent on many factors, specifically your engine power, and available traction. The best clutch is that offers a lot of tuning options. It's really a friction battle, if you think about it, between the shoe, bell, and the tire's surface. If either wins, you lose. Engagement is defining the RPM level in which you want your shoes to make contact with the bell, subsequently moving the vehicle. This is very important now because, remember, two-stroke engines exponentially gain power as their RPMs increase. Heavier shoes engage earlier, lighter shoes engage later. Having a staggered engagement, so different spring tensions, can be advantageous if you want linear acceleration. Now, if you require an abrupt torque delivery and your vehicle can handle it, hell yeah, get nasty with it.